When I first started watching anime, I decided to keep track of all the anime I'd seen. One day, years later, I looked at the list and, like a true YouTuber who's out of ideas, I thought to myself, hey, this could make for some good content. So today, I'm ranking every single anime series I've ever seen. We might be here for a while. To be honest, when I first started watching this anime, I didn't expect much. I hadn't really heard anyone talk about it, and the only reason I watched it was because it was in the top 100 on my anime list. A Place Further Than the Universe is a slice-of-life anime about 4 girls who wish to go to Antarctica. Although the story sounds basic, this anime manages to do something that many other slice-of-life anime fail to do, and that's having an interesting story. For most slice-of-life anime, the characters and interactions between those characters are the main focus, and they are usually more episodic. But A Place Further Than the Universe feels more like a story-driven anime with characters and character interactions that are very similar to those in slice-of-life anime. The characters are also especially well written, and the way the friendship between the girls develops as the show goes on is very well done. Since it's the first anime, A Place Further Than the Universe is highest on the list by default, but I have a feeling it's going to stay there for a while. Anohana was a weird anime for me. It isn't bad by any means, in fact I think it's pretty good, but it just didn't work for me. Anohana is about a boy who begins to see the ghost of his childhood friend one summer, who wants him to grant her a final wish. To do so, the boy reconnects with his other childhood friends to try and grant the wish. Despite the fact that I think the characters are pretty well written and feel like real childhood friends, something about the show prevented me from being completely interested. Sometimes I felt the emotion was just forced and wasn't really effective, and with the show being so short, as soon as I was finally beginning to get used to the characters, the show ended. It's a shame because I think the central theme is very interesting. It's about how different people handle tragedy and how difficult it is to move on from such an event. I might one day revisit this anime because I really want to like it, but for now, Anohana is going under A Place Further Than the Universe. As a whole, I think Attack on Titan is incredible. It has great political drama, beautiful fights, a story with many twists and turns, and an insanely well-developed world. But my favorite thing about the show is the unique way in which the show handles the encounters between the Titans and the characters. Starting with the first episode, we encounter our first Titan, and see the seemingly unmatchable strength that they possess. The first season does a great job of making the humans seem helpless and weak, making every encounter with the Titans tense and terrifying. The characters are very interesting as well, with almost all of them having an interesting backstory, motivation, or mentality, and seeing the characters change over the course of the show is very satisfying, and makes the characters feel very realistic. Also, the show's ability to kill off almost any character is very good here, as it makes the idea of your favorite character dying a very possible thing, making encounters with Titans even more tense. I also like how the show slowly escalates with every season, with the 4th and final season being the most serious and large scale. I am extremely excited to see how the rest of season 4 goes, and definitely recommend you watch this show if you somehow haven't already. Attack on Titan goes above A Place Further Than the Universe, making it number 1 at the moment. Beastars is about a world in which humans don't exist, and animals run the world. Though all animals try to live together, tension is high between herbivores and carnivores. Herbivores fear the carnivores, and carnivores must take measures to handle their hunger for herbivores. This fear is made even greater when a herbivore student is found killed. The first season gives us a look into the interesting way in which the world runs, and how herbivores and carnivores live together. Meanwhile, the second season is more focused on solving the murder of the herbivore student. The way that Beastars is constantly expanding the world with great world building makes it feel so real, and this allows you to more easily get invested in the problems that exist in that world. Also, the characters are very interesting, and the interactions between those characters give us more information about the world. Though some may have been put off by the use of 3D animation, that is also extremely well done in this show. Not only does it manage to look great, but sometimes it even looks like really good 2D animation. Overall, I think that Beastars is a very solid show, from the characters to the story. I'm putting Beastars below A Place Further Than the Universe, but above Anohana. I was drawn to Burn the Witch because of the nice artwork and animation, and while it consistently delivered on those fronts, the story ended up being very weak. The story boils down to little more than a story about two girls who fight dragons. No interesting side plots, just a pretty basic story. Overall, I just didn't find the world or story that interesting. There just weren't enough unique ideas to get me interested. On top of that, the characters felt very basic and cookie cutter. Also, with only 3 episodes, the show was able to do little more than introduce the characters. This show is going under Anohana, putting it at the bottom of the list. Cowboy Bebop is a show that I didn't fully appreciate until after I had finished it. For the most part, Cowboy Bebop doesn't have much of a story, and mostly follows an episodic format with stories about the adventures of a group of space cowboys. It's a show that's extremely laid back and fun, but also serious and dark when it needs to be. By far, the best part of the show is the characters. Almost every character that appears in the show has an interesting backstory and personality, and we get to see them develop in a way that feels very natural, despite some of these characters being in only 1 episode. Overall, Cowboy Bebop is a very fun show, with some episodes that are truly amazing, that let us learn more about our characters and the world they live in. Cowboy Bebop goes above A Place Further Than the Universe, but still under Attack on Titan. So far in this video, I think that Darling in the FranXX is the only anime that I would call bad. Darling in the FranXX is a show about a group of children who pilot mechs and are tasked with protecting moving cities, home to the remaining humans, from monsters. Except it's not really about that, because most of the show amounts to boring drama between boring characters. Just by looking at the main cast, you can tell what each of their personalities are, and overall the character designs are very boring. I mean, the main character literally looks like the basic black-haired anime protagonist that everyone jokes about. Even Zero Two, the character that everyone online simps over, is boring, and I found her backstory to be very uninteresting. On top of the boring characters, the show also fails to do anything interesting. I could see most of the plot points coming, and after finishing the show, I just felt like the episode count could have been halved. The only good thing I can say about this show is some of the fights look good, but overall, it's just a subpar show that wishes it was deep. Darling in the FranXX goes under Burn the Witch, putting it at the bottom of the list. Before I say anything else, I just want to acknowledge how good this show looks. The use of the traditional Japanese art style was really cool to see, and the colors and animation bring the show to life in an amazing way. After watching the end of episode 19, I was talking about it for days, and if you've seen it, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But despite the amazing art and animation, I honestly think that Demon Slayer is a pretty basic show. Demon Slayer is about a boy whose family is killed by demons. The only survivor is his sister, who has been turned into a demon. To find a way to change her back, our main character becomes a demon slayer and sets out to find the cure. The show doesn't really do anything amazing or unexpected, but that isn't to say that this show isn't fun. I really enjoy the characters, and there were many moments in the show that were very enjoyable to watch. I think, though a bit overrated, Demon Slayer is definitely a solid show, and I think the same goes for the movie as well, which basically just feels like another season. Demon Slayer goes between Beastars and Anohana. Since I've already made a review of this show on my channel, I'll keep my review short here. Dr. Stone isn't an extremely deep show, but I think it's a lot of fun and a great show to watch when you need a break from more serious anime. It has pretty good characters, and it's just a lot of fun. If you want a more in-depth review, go watch my video on it, but right now Dr. Stone goes just below Demon Slayer, but above Anohana. Erased is about a man who has the power to go back in time, but only when he experiences a tragedy, allowing him to prevent that tragedy. One day, after experiencing an event, he is sent back 18 years in the past, to prevent it from happening. To do this, he has to solve the kidnapping and murder of one of his classmates. With this show, I am very impressed with what they were able to do in a 12-episode runtime. Each episode was well paced, and there was never a boring moment. Also, the mystery was very interesting, and every episode is suspenseful and reveals more about the mystery. Also, the characters are very likable, and it's very easy to sympathize with them. The only part that I dislike is the ending. I thought the way the culprit was finally caught was very unrealistic and anticlimactic. Overall, though, the show is very well done. Erased goes above Anohana simply because I like the characters more, but still underneath Dr. Stone. Fire Force is a show that I really wanted to be good. I started watching it when it came out in 2019 and was brought back to the show every week because of the beautiful animation. But I was still waiting for the plot to get interesting. Unfortunately, that never really happened. Fire Force is about a world where people randomly combust and turn into fire demons. To combat them, teams mostly made up of people with fire-based powers were formed. The biggest problem with the show is that it is very basic. Though the plot seems interesting on the surface, as the show goes on you realize that this is not the case. I feel like the plot had a lot of potential, but the show misses so many good opportunities to do something interesting. And honestly, it just felt like the show preferred to go with a more safe, basic story. Also, I didn't care about the characters very much. They too felt very basic and boring, and they barely developed over the course of 2 seasons. Honestly, the only reason I continued watching the show after the second season came out was because of the fights. The fights are visually amazing and always unique. The use of fire powers is really well done and cool, with each power being unique and interesting to watch. No two characters have the same power, despite all of the powers being fire-based at their core. I honestly think that the powers are definitely the most fleshed out part of the show, and I really like how they handled it. Good action is rarely ever enough to make me finish a show, and the fact that I finished Fire Force is a testament to the quality of the action. All of the fights are smooth, colorful, and I really like the sound effects that they use because it fits so perfectly with the fights and just elevates them so much. I put Fire Force above Burn the Witch, but under Anohana. Though I very much enjoyed it, it's not quite good enough to be placed any higher than that. As soon as I started getting into anime, I heard about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, and how it was one of the best anime of all time. I thought that it was impossible for the show to be as good as people said, and so I went into it expecting to be disappointed. But the exact opposite happened. The show was much better than I ever would have expected. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is about 2 brothers who are searching for a way to get their bodies back after an accident involving alchemy. To start off with, I found the story to be very interesting. The main premise of 2 brothers searching for a way to get their bodies back is already very interesting and very well done, but the way the show seamlessly evolves from there to tell a larger story added even more to love about it. On my first viewing though, I was worried about the large number of characters that the story followed. I thought that this would cause many of the characters to be poorly thought out and boring, but I was wrong again. Every character has their own morals, goals, and personalities, and develop in interesting ways as the show goes on. On top of this, the world building was very well done, with almost every episode telling us more about the world. Also, the power system is extremely well thought out, and every fight looks absolutely amazing. Fullmetal Alchemist goes above Attack on Titan, making it number 1. God of High School does not have a good story. Though it starts out with a pretty basic and sort of boring tournament arc, the winner of which is crowned God of High School, eventually by the end of the series, the show goes completely off the rails in a bizarre ending that makes no sense at all. Honestly, the story doesn't seem well planned at all. Many characters were introduced just before the final episode so they could be in the finale. This resulted in those characters being extremely underdeveloped and leaving us with little reason to care about them. And the same thing goes for the main characters. Even though we spend most of the show with them, we don't really learn much about them, and they don't really feel like real people at all. Also, the ending on its own is just insane. Things just sort of happen for no reason, and though there's a bit of an explanation, it really doesn't feel like enough. None of this mattered to me because it was the fights that made this show worth watching. Every single fight in this show is incredible, with not only the animation, but also the fight choreography. Every fight is smooth both in animation and choreography, and every impact feels powerful. Even though the stakes aren't even that high, the fights still draw you in, and suddenly you're rooting for a character despite knowing very little about them. Do I recommend this show? Probably not. You are honestly better off just watching the fights on YouTube. But I enjoyed it, so I'm putting it way higher than it deserves to be, under Fire Force, but above Burn the Witch. Japan Sinks 2020 ended up being very disappointing. Though the show was advertised as a natural disaster show, it continued to devolve over time until the natural disaster became the background, and far more boring ideas and characters became the focus. Japan Sinks 2020 is about the whole island of Japan sinking into the ocean. We follow our main characters as they try to escape the island before it's too late. As I said before, the show is barely about the natural disaster. In fact, there is a full arc where an antagonist is introduced and the main characters have to defeat them, seemingly forgetting about the island sinking. It's just odd to me that the show thought that it needed to be more than a natural disaster show. That's what it was advertised as, and yet most of the time was spent on other, more boring things. Had the show been longer, I could sort of see why they might want to add different threats so as to keep the story more interesting. But the show is only 10 episodes. I think that a well-written disaster show could easily fill 10 episodes on its own. On top of all this, we barely get to know the characters, and because of this, the stakes never feel very high, because I didn't care about the characters or what happened to them. Overall, none of the characters really stuck out to me, and I think the story strayed too far from the basic idea of a natural disaster. Japan Sinks 2020 goes under Darling in the Franxx, putting it at the bottom of the list. Jujutsu Kaisen is very similar to shows like God of High School and Fire Force. Its fights are 100% the highlight of the show because of the incredible animation and fluidity of them. But Jujutsu Kaisen manages to do something that those shows can't do. It made me care about its characters and story. Jujutsu Kaisen is about a guy who's forced to share his body with the King of Curses after consuming a cursed object. Because of this, he becomes very important to a group of curse hunters known as Jujutsu sorcerers. As a result, he is forced to join a Jujutsu school to help fight curses. Despite the story seeming a bit basic on paper, it is very enjoyable because it feels familiar, and despite the characters also seeming very basic, they were easy to care about because of their familiarity. They give off the feeling of classic anime like Naruto, and it's that familiarity that Jujutsu Kaisen uses to its advantage. But aside from that, the story and characters are just really good. The characters are instantly likable, and the story is unique and really fun to watch. Overall, Jujutsu Kaisen is insanely fun, and the fights go far beyond those in Fire Force and God of High School. Jujutsu Kaisen goes above Cowboy Bebop, but under Attack on Titan. Love is War is not a bad show. In fact, I think it's a really good rom-com anime. That being said, I hated it. Love is War is about two teens on the student council who both have crushes on each other, but neither of them will confess until the other one does. Each episode we see one of the two characters trying to get each other to confess in creative and funny ways. I don't even think the show is boring. I actually think that its comedy can be really good, but that didn't matter for me because I hated the characters and was watching the show for the wrong reason. Both characters annoy me so much for no real reason, especially Kaguya, who just came off as some annoying spoiled rich girl. The side characters aren't as bad, but then again, they're side characters and obviously not the main focus of the show. Also, I spent the whole show waiting for their relationship to progress, or for one of them to finally confess. But when nothing happened in the finale, I realized that that wasn't the goal of the show. And that's when I realized that I had been watching the show for the wrong reason. I thought it would be more focused on the romance, but really the romance was used to create comedy, which, to the show's credit, it did very well. Though I do think my expectations hindered my enjoyment of the show, I think if I were to go back to the show now, I still wouldn't enjoy it because of the characters as I mentioned before, and because the comedy for the most part didn't work for me personally. Though I know it doesn't deserve it, Love is War goes under God of High School, but above Burn the Witch. Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken is an extremely underrated show in my opinion. Despite it coming out in a season filled with little else that was interesting, it seemed that it slipped by many people, and I think that's really too bad. I think the show is a great slice of life anime, with characters that are really good and have a really good dynamic as well. Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken is about a group of girls who dream of creating an anime. When I first watched the show, I thought the shortness of it would result in the show ending just as I became comfortable with the characters, but this didn't end up being a problem. Within the first couple of episodes, I was already interested in the main cast because of how unique they were. They were nothing like the characters I'd seen in other slice of life anime, and this made the interactions between them very unique. Overall, the show did a great job with its characters, and every minute with them interacting was fun to watch. But the good parts of the anime don't end there, because the show is absolutely amazing visually. Occasionally, the show will go into a more hand-drawn watercolor style to represent the imagination of the characters. These segments have great music, incredible visuals, and are just really fun to watch overall. Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken goes above A Place Further Than the Universe, but under Cowboy Bebop. Kill la Kill is a show that I've thought about a lot. It's a show where I truly don't know what makes it so good, but I'll try my best to explain. Kill la Kill is a show about a girl who's looking for her father's killer. When she finally finds a lead, she teams up with a sentient schoolgirl outfit created by her father to fight all those in her way. Honestly, the best part of the show is the absolute insanity of it. Every episode is fast-paced and contains non-stop action and comedy, leaving you no time to process what's happening before something else occurs. The show is constantly throwing comedy, fights, and plot at you, and though it really shouldn't, it works amazingly well. On top of that, all the characters are over the top and super entertaining to watch, and somehow, despite being super confusing and sometimes almost nonsensical, the story managed to have me interested. Kill la Kill is probably one of the most anime I've ever watched, but it's because of this that it stands out so much. Kill la Kill goes just above Cowboy Bebop, but below Jujutsu Kaisen. The things that set K-On! Apart from other slice-of-life anime are very subtle. It doesn't present crazy new ideas or put a spin on the slice-of-life genre, but simply perfects the genre in little ways. K-On! Is about a group of girls who are all in a music club. To begin with, the characters are all very distinct and likable. Also, the dynamic between all of them is excellent and really feels like a group of friends. On top of this, the side characters are all fun on, and I was always happy to see them when they appeared in an episode. Obviously, I think the characters are the biggest reason why I love this show. Their dynamic just works for me, and the interactions between the characters feel so natural. It's also the first time a slice of life anime had me excited for the next episode. Usually, since there's no ongoing story, I find it hard to get excited for the next episode of a slice of life show, but K-On! Was just so enjoyable for me that this wasn't a problem. Within a few weeks, I had seen both seasons and also the movie, and when it ended, it was the first time I really wanted more episodes of a show. Overall, I think K-On! Is a great show for people both new to anime and people that have seen a lot of anime. Seeing as K-On! Is my third favorite anime ever, it takes first place for now, just above Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Konosuba is by far the funniest anime I've ever seen. It's a show where literally everything is a joke, and it's done so well and never gets old. Konosuba is about a boy who is killed, but then finds himself transported to a new RPG-style world. From the beginning, it's obvious that the show is parodying the isekai genre. The show uses almost every isekai trope in the book, but puts a spin on it that makes it absolutely hilarious. Also, the characters are great. Every character is absolutely insane and stupid, and yet somehow extremely likable. Before I knew it, I really cared about these characters for no real reason, and to this day, they are some of my favorite anime characters of all time. The dynamic of the main group is just really good. The conversations between the main cast feel so natural, and gives you the feeling of friends who are close enough to make fun of and mess with each other. The side characters are also great. Each one brings so many hilarious moments, and their interactions with the main cast are always fun to watch. I was also glad to see that the movie is just as good as the show, and definitely a must-watch if you like the series. Despite the show being a parody of isekai anime, I think that even if you haven't watched that much isekai, you would still be able to appreciate the humor, which is just a testament to how good the comedy is. Konosuba is my second all-time favorite anime, so it goes just above K-On! In first place for now. Mob Psycho 100 is an incredible show. It's a show that builds off of the foundation of the superhero genre and uses it to tell emotional stories about its characters. Mob Psycho 100 is about a boy who has extremely strong psychic abilities. Despite this, he still experiences very human problems. He's very anxious and socially awkward and often chooses not to fight, as it goes against his morals. And when he does fight, it's usually because he's overloaded by emotion and feels like the situation is out of his control. A great way to describe this show is as One Punch Man, but with characters that feel far more human and real. Unlike most shonen anime, this show isn't really about the powers or the fights. The powers and fights are used to tell a more personal story about the characters. And this is what makes the characters in the show so good. Through every fight, you learn a great amount about the characters and their personalities and morals. Also, the main cast is just super likable. I've also heard people complain about the artwork in the show, and I can sort of see why. Though I personally really like how unique and interesting the show looks, it's definitely not as clean as the artwork in other modern anime. But regardless of whether you like the art style or not, the animation in this show can be absolutely incredible. Many of the fights, on top of being extremely interesting and emotional, have smooth animation that is honestly some of the best I've ever seen. Overall, this show is very unique, interesting, and full of emotion, and that's why it's my favorite anime of all time. Mob Psycho 100 goes just above Konosuba, making it the permanent first place. Mushoku Tensei is a great example of how the isekai genre can be used to tell stories that are interesting and unique. Mushoku Tensei is about a man who is unemployed and spends his days in his room. One day, he is hit by a car and wakes up in a magical world as a baby. Despite the plot sounding identical to those of other isekai anime, Mushoku Tensei does something that those shows don't do. Rather than being a basic power fantasy, Mushoku Tensei Tensei is more about the main character. The way our main character sees the new world is very different from how most isekai characters see it, where most isekai characters would see it as a world in which they can use their power to get girls and defeat villains. Our main character simply sees it as a second chance at being a better person, and make sure to not repeat mistakes he made in his original life. And this is what makes the show so great. Getting to see our main character do everything he can to be the best person he can be while learning the rules of the world is super compelling. Also, the characters are great. The main character himself is not a good person, but seeing him try his best in the new world is very interesting. Also, the side characters are all great. Each one of them is very likable and work well with the main character. Overall, Mushoku Tensei is a very enjoyable show that uses the isekai genre to tell a very interesting and unique story. Mushoku Tensei goes above Kill la Kill, but just under Jujutsu Kaisen. My Hero Academia is about a boy who lives in a world where 80% of the population has powers. He dreams of being a hero but doesn't have powers, making his dream impossible. That is, until he meets a hero who passes his power on to the boy. I very much enjoyed the first few seasons of My Hero Academia. The story presented some really interesting ideas, and though they didn't explore them as much as I would have liked, the main plot was interesting enough to keep me watching, and overall the show was just fun to watch casually. Unfortunately though, as the show went on and more seasons came out, I began to become bored with the show. After season 3, the show just felt like it was dragging on, with nothing really happening to progress the main story. When this problem continued in season 5, I realized that the show just doesn't need 5 seasons. I feel like 1 or 2 seasons used well could tell the My Hero Academia story in a satisfying way. Also, I'm not a huge fan of the main cast. While there are certain characters that I absolutely love, most of them were just uninteresting to me and sometimes straight up annoying. All of the characters seem very static and barely ever develop in meaningful ways. Overall, I think the show is a lot of fun, but I just don't think that justifies a 5th season, and most likely more after that. It really is too bad, because there's some plot points that I really like a lot, but it's just not enough to keep me watching the show. My Hero Academia goes above Fire Force, but under Anohana. When it comes to Evangelion, I feel like I'm missing something, because I just can't see why people love the show so much. Evangelion is about a world that is constantly under attack from beings known as angels. To combat them, mechs called Evas are used, but require a child to pilot them. To begin with, I found the story to be very boring. The main plot of mechs fighting aliens is very boring and basic, and every attempt to make the plot more interesting failed because of how poorly things were explained. Out of nowhere, something important would briefly be mentioned, and that would be all we learned about it. Also, every episode was very predictable and formulaic. On top of all this, I found the characters to be very underdeveloped. With Shinji, I can see what they were trying to do. They were trying to make a deep, interesting character, but they used their time very poorly, resulting in his arc feeling rushed. Even though the show had 24 episodes, I feel like way too little time was spent actually exploring Shinji as a character, and when they did, it was in really boring, uninteresting ways. As a result, I found him to be underdeveloped and poorly handled, and the same thing goes for most of the other characters. They were set up to be complex and interesting, but the time was either never put in to develop them, or it was just done poorly. Overall, I struggle to see Evangelion as anything but a fairly basic show, which is neither bad nor particularly good. I will probably revisit the show one day because I really do want to like it, and like I said before, I feel like I'm simply just missing something. But as it stands, Evangelion goes under Love is War, but above Burn the Witch. I thought that No Game No Life was fun. I found the games enjoyable despite the basic plot, and I thought the characters could be fairly funny at times. No Game No Life is about two siblings who are transported to a world where everyone plays games to decide everything. Being extremely good at all games, the siblings quickly take over the kingdom and aim to rule the whole world. I think where the show really lost me was when it tried to become serious. In the movie, games are no longer the main focus, and the whole movie is spent explaining lore that I really didn't care about. I just wanted to see the characters play games that were extremely anime and fun to watch. I didn't really care about the Great War or any of the backstory, because the world was fairly boring for the most part. In my opinion, the show tried to be serious when they had very little story to begin with. This made the movie just feel unnecessary. The same thing goes for the characters. While fun to watch, none of them were really all that memorable, and so the attempts to make them seem deep often failed. No Game No Life goes above God of High School, but below Fire Force. Being one of the first anime I ever watched, One Punch Man is very special for me. I think One Punch Man is a great example of how even shows with basic plots can be amazing when executed well. One Punch Man is about a man who, as his name suggests, can defeat any enemy in one punch. Because of the basic story, you would think that the show would be boring, but it's the characters and comedy that really make this show as good as it is. To start off with, the characters are amazing. The main character Saitama is such a fun protagonist, and his lazy, laid-back personality works so well in the show. Since he can kill anything in one hit, this makes fights little more than an inconvenience to him, making for some really funny scenes where all tension is destroyed by Saitama not caring at all. Aside from him, I really enjoyed the side characters a lot. Every one of them is so memorable and work off of Saitama so well, making for some of the funniest moments in the show. And if the comedy of the show isn't enough for you, the fights themselves are absolutely beautifully animated. Each fight is fast-paced, colorful, and insanely fun to watch. Overall, One Punch Man is just a really fun show with some of the best comedy and fights I've ever seen in an anime. One Punch Man goes above Kill la Kill, but below Mushoku Tensei. This is another one that I already made a video for, so if you want a more in-depth review, go watch that video. The best thing about the show is how effectively it's able to tell a story in a short amount of time. Within 3 episodes, the show sets up a character, presents their unique problem, and then solves the problem in a short amount of time, while still feeling satisfying and just as good as any longer arc could be. The same thing goes for the movie, which essentially just feels like an additional 3 episodes. Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai goes above No Game No Life, but below Fire Force. Re:Zero is an absolutely amazing show. Just by adding a little twist to the isekai genre, Re:Zero created an incredible story. Re:Zero is about a boy who's hit by a truck. When he wakes up, he finds himself in a magical world, with a power unique to him. The power to respawn. Every time he dies, he respawns at a random checkpoint, allowing him to prevent bad things from happening. To begin with, the story is super interesting, and the way they handled the power is what makes the show so special. Instead of seeing the power as a good thing, our main character quickly realizes the horrible parts of his power. While he is able to respawn, he is forced to watch his friends die over and over again, until he is finally able to make it to the next checkpoint. And this is how the show unexpectedly becomes a bit of a horror anime. Every few episodes, we are forced to watch characters we care about die over and over again, and we see how experiencing this affects our main character. Honestly, this is a very creative way of creating horror, and it never gets old. On top of this, the characters are great. Every character is very likable, with most of the more prominent characters getting a good amount of development. The only part of Re:Zero I didn't like was the movie. The movie didn't include our main character, and focused more on the backstory of one of the side characters. While I thought it was interesting, I didn't feel like it needed a movie, and I thought that the story could have been told just as effectively in a few episodes of the show. It just dragged on for a bit too long, but I still think it's worth watching. Overall, the show is just another great example of the possibilities of the isekai genre. Re:Zero goes above Attack on Titan, but below Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Steins Gate is an absolutely amazing show that displays how time travel can be used to tell incredible stories, not only about time travel itself, but about characters. Steins Gate is about a group of friends who accidentally create time travel. With this newfound power, our main character finds himself traveling through time in search for a timeline where nothing goes wrong and everyone gets to live happily. Being about time travel, you would expect many plot holes and inconsistencies, but the time travel is handled very well here, and this is rarely ever a problem. Also, much like Re:Zero, Steins Gate spends some time exploring the effects that seeing failed timelines over and over again has on the main character. As for the characters, all of them are great. The main character, while seemingly uncaring on the surface, is shown to really care about his friends through just how much he is willing to do to make sure they are all happy. This is how the show makes him so likable. Despite being a mad scientist who cares for nothing but science on the surface, it's through his actions that we get to see his true personality. Aside from him, the side characters are also very likable. Almost instantly, the writing does a good job of making all of them feel like people who really have been friends for a long time, and the dynamic between all of them feels natural and fun to watch. And as the story adds more characters, they all manage to work well together while still having distinct personalities, and the size of the main cast never feels too much. Also, the movie is absolutely incredible and manages to be just as good as the main show, despite not including the main character very much. Overall, I think Steins Gate is an absolute must-watch anime. Steins Gate goes above Attack on Titan, but just below Re:Zero. I think that Steins Gate Zero is a good anime. Unfortunately, it just didn't capture my interest as much as the original did. Steins Gate Zero is about a timeline in which the main character fails to save everyone, and as a result, he's given up on time traveling. Steins Gate Zero explores the result that failing to save everyone had on the main character. While I think the show did a good job of showing how broken the main character is and his journey to try and move on in an interesting, realistic way, I found the story to be a bit slow. Also, I found Steins Gate Zero to be more confusing than Steins Gate. I often found myself being confused by the story, and an explanation would never come. To me, the time travel felt like an afterthought, and I honestly don't think it was necessary for this show. I think the show would have been much better as a shorter series that was solely about the main character coming to terms with what happened. Overall, while I think Steins Gate Zero is good, there are far more elements that I didn't like than in Steins Gate. I honestly just didn't enjoy the show as much, and therefore, Steins Gate Zero goes above Demon Slayer, but below Beastars. Much like Kill la Kill, Gurren Lagann is insanely fun, while still having a plot that is interesting and compelling. Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann is about a world where everyone lives underground because of monsters called beastmen who live on the surface. One day, our main character finds a robot called a gunman and uses it to explore the surface world while destroying beastmen. In the beginning, the show's story is very basic. The characters simply explore the world, meeting new friends along the way while fighting the beastmen, but it's the characters that make the story so fun to watch. Every aspect of the show is over-exaggerated, and the same goes for the characters. Each of them are crazy, weird people whose weirdness makes them grow on you. Despite the large cast of characters, I never felt that there were too many, as each of them added to the chaos of the show in a unique way. Overall, the first half of the show is super fun, and gives you plenty of time to warm up to the characters. However, the last half of the show is very different from the first. After a time skip, we see the main cast running a city on the surface. After defeating the main villain from the first half of the show, it is now safe to live on the surface. That is, until more enemies begin appearing and attacking the city. The second half of the show takes a much more serious approach to the story. The stakes are much higher, and the story becomes more important than it was in the first half. I think the switch from a more silly, casual show to a more serious, story-driven show was done very well. And while I don't like the second half quite as much as I like the first, I still think it's really solid. Gurren Lagann goes above Kill la Kill, but below One Punch Man. The Promised Neverland is one of the most terrifying shows I've ever seen, and the way that the horror is handled is absolutely incredible. The Promised Neverland is about a group of children who live in an orphanage surrounded by walls, preventing any of the children from seeing the outside world. One day, our main character comes across the body of one of the children who were supposedly adopted, and slowly they uncover the dark secrets of the orphanage and search for a way to escape. To begin with, the horror in this show is done so well. Instead of having clear basic horror, the horror comes from the paranoia. As the characters find out more about the orphanage, they slowly realize that the person who cares for the children at the orphanage may be involved as well. This results in every encounter with those people being suspenseful and terrifying, not knowing what their true intentions are or if they know what the children know. Also, the hopelessness of the situation adds to the horror. Being children, fighting their way out of the orphanage is not an option, and so they are forced to outsmart the adults. This means that one mistake or one failed plan could result in the children being killed, and so every second is spent wondering whether or not their plans will work, and if not, what could happen to the characters. On top of all this, each character is very likable and unique, and this allows you to feel the fear that they feel. Also, each plan is very well thought out, and I found them to be very clever and interesting. Overall, the show is a great example of psychological horror done right, and the characters and cleverness of the show make it so entertaining to watch. Unfortunately, the second season throws all of this out the window. After finally escaping, the children find themselves in a world full of monsters. Their one goal is to find more humans and escape the monsters. Right away, I noticed that the characters in this season didn't feel right. None of their plans were anywhere near as well thought out as those in the first season, and at some points, I found myself thinking of better ways that certain events could have been avoided. Also, the story itself is nowhere near as interesting or complex as the first season, and the worst part of it all is how the horror is handled. Now, instead of the horror being psychological and truly terrifying, most of the horror scenes are about the characters directly facing danger. The second season was so bad compared to the first that I actually never ended up finishing it, but because of just how amazing the first season is, the show still places high in the rankings, going above Jujutsu Kaisen, but under Attack on Titan. Toradora is a fairly basic rom-com anime about an unlikely pair that slowly becomes closer with each other. Obviously, the characters were the best part of the show. Despite seeming somewhat basic at first, over time we got to see how unique the characters were, and the show did a great job of building the relationship between the main characters at a good pace in an enjoyable way. Also, since both characters have such different personalities, it was interesting to see how they bond despite their differences. As a whole, the show is just really fun, but also really sweet and emotional when it needs to be. It's a show that has no right to be as good as it is, but somehow everything just comes together to create characters and relationships that I really cared about. Toradora goes above Beastars, but below A Place Further Than the Universe. Tower of God is a pretty unremarkable show. Aside from its art and animation, nothing about the show really stands out all that much, and the same goes for the story. Tower of God is about a tower said to have a great treasure at the top. Getting to the top of the tower grants a person any wish, but only those who are chosen can enter. When the main character is suddenly chosen to enter the tower, he has to fight to get to the top. Starting with the story, I never really found it all that interesting. I mostly saw the story as a device to show off the fights in the show, which, to the show's credit, are very well animated. But the story itself just felt like a tournament arc and never really brought any new ideas to the table. On top of this, the characters are all very boring and uninteresting, especially the main character. I found the main character to be a bit plain and pointless, as I felt the show would barely change without him in it. They try to make his motive for getting to the top of the tower interesting, but in the end it's a basic plot where the boy tries to save the girl, and the twist at the end isn't interesting enough to justify this. The side characters aren't much better either. Most of them fit into a basic anime trope and end up being poorly written characters that never develop or change during the course of the show. Also, I found the interactions between the characters to feel sort of unnatural, and this made the characters even more hard for me to like. Overall, while I don't think it's bad, Tower of God is definitely basic. I place Tower of God under Evangelion, but above Burn the Witch. Wonder Egg Priority is one of the most disappointing anime I've ever seen. For the first 10 episodes, the show gets really dark and explores ideas and themes that I don't see explored in anime very often. On top of that, the main plot was interesting and expanded on very well. I also found all of the characters to be interesting and likable, and I really cared about their struggles. But it's the ending that ruined the series for me. Starting in the last 2 episodes of the show rushes through events leading up to the final episode. Then there was a 2-month-long break before the show finally ended with a special episode. The plot of the special felt extremely disconnected from everything that was being set up in the last few episodes of the series, which would have been acceptable had the ending been interesting, but the ending itself was very basic and lackluster, and completely out of nowhere. It's just really too bad that this show ended so badly, because I think that everything leading up to that point was excellent. Wonder Egg Priority goes under Beastars but above Demon Slayer. And there you have it, every anime I've watched so far, coming to a total of 35 shows. Let's get to the final standings. Number 35, Japan Sinks 2020. Number 34, Darling in the Franxx. Number 33, Burn the Witch. Number 32, Tower of God. Number 31, Neon Genesis Evangelion. Number 30, Kaguya-Sama Love is War. Number 29, God of High School. Number 28, No Game No Life. Number 27, Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai. Number 26, Fire Force. Number 25, My Hero Academia. Number 24, Anohana. Number 23, Erased. Number 22, Dr. Stone. Number 21, Demon Slayer. Number 20, Steins Gate Zero. Number 19, Wonder Egg Priority. Number 18, Beastars. Number 17, Toradora. Number 16, A Place Further Than the Universe. Number 15, Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken. Number 14, Cowboy Bebop. Number 13, Kill la Kill. Number 12, Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. Number 11, One Punch Man. Number 10, Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation. Number 9, Jujutsu Kaisen. Number 8, The Promised Neverland. Number 7, Attack on Titan. Number 6, Steins Gate. Number 5, Re:Zero. Number 4, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Number 3, K-On! Number 2, Konosuba. And number 1, Mob Psycho 100. Well, thank you for watching. I'm not gonna do something like this again anytime soon, but when I do, I might review every anime movie I've seen, or maybe just update the list, cause there's still a lot of really good anime I have to watch. I don't really know, but for now, I'm out of here. This took way too long. You better like and subscribe, I'm serious.